when you take away that artificial line that looks like it was done with a ruler, and that's what it was. Some guy sat there years ago and they said, "Rah." Well, when you take away that and you look at that beautiful formation of Canada and the United States, there is no place anywhere in the world that looks like that.
But here's the thing that's on my mind. Donald Trump loves yanking the chain of Justin Trudeau, and we'll see how he deals with Trudeau 2.0 Mark Carney. But one of the things that I think really upset Trudeau, and I think it upset other Canadians too, was the proposal by Donald Trump that Canada join the United States as what he called a cherished 51st state.
So we spend $200 billion a year subsidizing Canada. We don't have to do that. And frankly, the way that gets solved is Canada should honestly become our 51st state. We wouldn't have a northern border problem. We wouldn't have a tariff problem. They don't have much. They spend very little, as you know, the least of almost anybody on military. And we spend the most of anybody on military. We have a great military. I rebuilt the military during my first term. We're going to have to rebuild it a little bit again. Not that much, but we're going to have to rebuild it a little bit again. But Canada would be great as our cherished 51st state. You wouldn't have to worry about borders. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. And by the way, Canada is very highly taxed, and we're very low tax. We're considered a low tax nation because of me, because I cut the taxes so low. So the people of Canada would pay much less tax.
But just to be
it makes a lot of sense. And by the way,
now, the closest analogy I can find, and I've been using this a lot, is this would be like proposing marriage to someone who's already married. It's an indecent proposal. It's shocking, even immoral. It hurts the feelings. It seems outrageous. And I think a lot of people have taken it that way. But here's another extension of that metaphor. If you are in a marriage that is doomed, if you are in an abusive relationship and someone else comes up and say, "Hey, what are you doing with that loser? Come with me and we'll improve everything about your life, a better relationship." If you were considering a divorce anyways, and someone comes along and says, "We'll give you a much stronger economy, we'll give you real national defense, we'll buy all your oil, come and join a winning team," well, you might not find the proposal so indecent. And in fact, as certain polls have shown, young men, particularly in Western Canada, are quite open to the idea of becoming American. Danielle Smith, of course, is a Canadian patriot and has done what other Canadian premiers said, which is try and work out a deal. But what about the idea of not all of Canada joining the United States, but of Western separatism, and in particular, Alberta independence? It's an idea that comes and goes, I suppose, like a pendulum, depending on how abusive Ottawa gets towards the West. We saw that in the 70s and 80s, and then the Reform Party came along, and then Stephen Harper cooled things off when he was prime minister, and then Trudeau came along. What is the state of Alberta independence today? Joining us now to talk about this is our friend Keith Wilson. We know him as a lawyer, including a lawyer for Tamara Lich, but he's also a political fella. He joins us now via Skype from Alberta. Keith, great to see you again.
Good to see you, Ezra.
You know, I think that Alberta has overtaken Quebec as the part of Canada most interested in a post-Canadian future. How would you rate Alberta independence feelings or Alberta separatist feelings in March of 2025?
It's off the scales. I've never seen it higher. I mean, we have a history of in Alberta being frustrated and feeling that we're not getting a fair deal and that we're being taken advantage of. So we're not in a happy marriage with the rest of Canada. And there's more and more people thinking that at a minimum, that Alberta needs to become an independent sovereign country. And there's many as well that are finding great appeal in this offer from an attempt by US President Donald Trump to expand the territorial boundaries of the United States of America.
Now, I think that if you watch that interview with Marco Rubio and Catherine Herridge, Rubio says where this whole 51st state thing came from. Trump said what would happen if we had zero trade deficit. And Trudeau blurted out, well, that would be the end of Canada. And that's where Trump replied by saying, well, join as a 51st state. Here's Marco Rubio explaining it to Catherine Herridge. Basically, Rubio, the way he puts it is, it was Trudeau who came up with the unthinkable idea, and Trump just ran with it. Take a look.
President Trump has talked about expanding the U.S. footprint. In a hot mic moment, Canada's Prime Minister said that absorbing Canada is a real thing. Is it a real thing?
Look, you know how that came about? President's meeting with Trudeau, and Trudeau says, well, if you even out our trade relationship, then we will cease to exist as a country. At which point the president responded very logically, and that is, well, if you can't exist without cheating in trade, then you should become a state. That was his observation.
That's how it started.
It is how it started. And I think he's told the story publicly. And that's how all this began.
So I think Trump, who's a very good negotiator, immediately detected part of Trudeau's psyche that felt a little inferior or vulnerable, and he just kept going after it and going after it. But I actually don't think that Trump has much more, I don't think he's got serious plans to absorb Canada as he does with the Panama Canal and with Greenland even. I think Trump just wants, certain trade irritants removed. I genuinely think that's all he wants. Of course, he would take Canada if it was for offer, but I think it's just the rhetorical style that a lot of Canadians are not used to. We're not used to a brawling New York swaggery guy. That's just not our way. I don't know. I don't think Trump is perfectly serious. What do you think?
Well, I don't know, obviously. But so I'll speculate. If he's not, he could be made to be serious because Alberta has so much to offer the United States. There was a report that came out last week that significantly increased, when based on analysis, the actual size of our reserves of natural gas and oil. And it's astronomical. And we could become becoming part of the United States, Alberta that is, their strategic reserve. It's not only that, we have critical minerals. We have incredible large boreal forest for lumber. The majority of our cattle that are produced in Alberta are incredible high quality beef, go south into the United States as a lot of agricultural products. So we've got a lot to offer the United States, and it would be a pretty good acquisition for him if he could do it. Frankly, to be very candid, I've had to look at this very seriously with what I've been watching happen out of Ottawa and the crazy leftist extremist policies that we've seen under the Liberals, and I think are going to get even worse under Carney. And I'm looking at the cost of living, inflation, all of these other factors, and the economy generally. And my wife and I have had to ask ourselves, what would be better for our 4 children? What would give them a better, happier, more prosperous future? And the answer is obvious. It's not staying in Canada. It's either Alberta becoming an independent country or Alberta joining in some way with the United States. I know that's controversial, but Alberta's been badly abused. We have so much to offer, and people are just done. They're just so fed up. And what Carney's going to, if he follows through on the things that he's written about in his books and his policies that he holds dear and near to his heart, net zero and all this other extremist nonsense that also his wife holds dear to her heart. She's just as much a zealot as he is. Guilbeault and Trudeau are going to look like a cakewalk. It's going to be Disneyland compared to what we're going to be facing. And I don't think Albertans will stand for it. What's really fascinating, Ezra, is you might want to ask me about what are the legal steps required if Alberta were to seek separation or join the United States? Because I think your listeners might be surprised at my answer.
I was coming to that because I was just wanting to note on Mark Carney. Today was his investiture as Prime Minister. He does not have a cabinet minister for Alberta. Not that there was a lot to choose from. But he has only 2 cabinet ministers west of Ontario. And he appointed Stephen Guilbeault, that maniac, in charge of Quebec. He's his Quebec political lieutenant, which basically confirms there will be no pipeline to the east. So I just wanted to say that before moving on to your next point. And my understanding, and I haven't studied this like it sounds like you have, but Quebec sort of was the icebreaker. It was the first to cut the path through the jungle on what are the laws surrounding secession. In the United States, secession, I think, is illegal. That was really what the Civil War was about. It was states saying, we're out of here, and the Union saying, no, you cannot leave. Slavery was a cause of the secession, but it was the secession. Lincoln himself said, I would fight this war even if not a single slave were freed. He wrote that in a very famous letter. I think in Canada, secession is not only completely lawful, but the Clarity Act and the Supreme Court have told us how to do it. Is that correct?
Yeah. So in 1998, there was a reference case that went to the Supreme Court of Canada because it looked like Quebec might want to succeed and become its own independent country. And if you don't have a legal mechanism, then you're only left with kinetic force, which you don't want to have. So the Supreme Court of Canada was asked to look at, is there a constitutional pathway for a province to leave Canada and become its own independent sovereign nation or join another nation? And the Supreme Court of Canada said yes. And they said what's required is a clear referendum, a referendum with a clear question, with a clear majority. And if a clear majority of the citizens vote in a referendum, a legally sanctioned referendum, to leave Canada and become their own sovereign, then it places each other province and First Nations, Aboriginal groups, and the federal government under a positive legal duty to enter into negotiations for the terms of that separation. Much in the same way that matrimonial property laws in every province require a divorcing couple. One can say, well, I'm not going to talk to her. Well, good luck with that, buddy, because you're going to have to. And then if not, there's a mechanism. So the same idea. So what's interesting, though, is that Alberta has gone further than any other province in putting all of the legal tools to implement that mechanism of separation in place, on the books, now, live, ready to go.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.